A growing and serious problem with the Muslim faith is the Islamic dilemma, which in short states the Quran upholds the Bible while at the same time contradicts it on serious issues. I would like to address one of those issues, the crucifixion. The timeline of biblical New Testament history starts with the death of Jesus and the creation of the Gospels. There are countless copies of the New Testament manuscripts coming from the 2nd century up to the first codexes, which was the first Bible in book form, and these came in the 4th century. Then the 5th century with the Latin Vulgate, which today there are 8,000 to 10,000 surviving copies, estimated to be only a fraction of the copies made, and this would be the standard Bible of the Western Church for 1,000 years. The Wycliffe Bible would be the first English translation appearing in the late 14th century. All of these Bibles, from the 4th to the 14th century all the way up today, all show that Jesus was crucified. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all show that Jesus was crucified, and these were eyewitness testimonies. In prophecy, in Psalm 22:16, and Isaiah 53:7, and Zechariah 12:10, and in also Daniel 9, these texts also substantiate the crucifixion. If we look at sources outside biblical texts, Roman historian Tacitus, Jewish historian Josephus, the Babylonian Talmud, and Lucian, the Greek satirist, all writing between 93 and 180 AD, all before the 4th century codexes, and they all also substantiate the fact that Jesus was crucified. Now, Muhammad died in 632 in the 7th century, and the Quran in Surah 4, verse 157, states that Jesus was not killed nor crucified. Now, who else held this belief? The early Gnostics, who believed Jesus was just a divine being who only appeared in flesh, and someone else was crucified in his place. There have been no named authors of the early Gnostics, and they seem to appear later than the canonical Gospels, and worse, they contradict the Gospels and the Old Testament. Now, if we fast forward to the Middle Ages, we come to the Gospel of Barnabas, which comes out between 14 and 1500 AD. One of these is written in Italian and one is written in Spanish, and many scholars believe that it is a forgery meant to prop up Islam because there are no authors that are known of them, and they talk of Muhammad and they have the Shahada, and they also state that Jesus is not the Messiah and that Muhammad is. Now, this is in stark contradiction to the Quran because Surah 3 verse 45 states that Jesus is the Messiah. It also contradicts the Quran on the birth pains of Mary and the eating of pork. On top of this, it claims Jesus sailed to Nazareth from Galilee when Nazareth was not on the seashore. It also states Jesus was born when Pilate was governor, when Jesus was around 30 years old. So support for Jesus not being crucified comes from the early Gnostics who contradict early Gospels and biblical ideas. Islam cannot accept the early Gnostics because they contradict the Quran on the divinity of Jesus. They also cannot accept the Gospel of Barnabas either because it contradicts the Quran on Jesus being the Messiah, and both these texts contradict the teachings of the Old and New Testament. This is problematic because the Quran upholds the inspiration, preservation, and authority of the Bible. Then it contradicts it and uses unreliable, long-past rejected sources like the early Gnostics and the Gospel of Barnabas to support their version of the events. This is one aspect of the Islamic dilemma that is difficult to refute. The number one response from Muslims to this argument is the Quran upholds the uncorrupted Bibles. That corruption of the Bible was corrected by the Quran. But this only holds weight if you can show what evidence proves the original text was in need of correction in the first place. And of course, this evidence has to be greater than the evidence used to make the original case. So the burden falls on Islam to explain how and where the biblical texts were corrupted to such an extent it managed to change all the Bibles throughout history in multiple languages and duped ancient historians. They also fooled the church fathers who preserved the same message throughout the centuries. Setting that aside, the serious issue is the Quran upholding the text of the Bible, the same inspired, preserved text, and then showing Jesus was not killed, contradicting the entire Bible. Because if Jesus was not killed, then there was no resurrection, and every page of the same Bible upheld in the Quran is false. All of the prophecies, the words of Jesus, the eyewitness testimony, all false. Think deeply which side holds the strongest evidence. One of these faiths is true and from God. Where is the other from?